So here's an unpopular opinion. Violet Plunkett from Mom, for me, is a top 3 character on the show. So why is that? Well, a couple things. First, you gotta talk about her actress. Sadie Calvano plays the role incredibly well. She does a good job with the more comedic scenes where she has, an attitude and is bratty, which we'll get to. But I think particularly with some of these more dramatic scenes, she really pulls that off incredibly well. I think she, should be in a lot more stuff than she is. The thing about Violet is I think originally she was supposed to be a very major character. She was in the early seasons, she got third billing, in the cast listening. She was supposed to be kind of the third mom of the title. The show was more so always about Christy and Bonnie, but she was there too. Like, she's kind of like how Emily is the third Gilmore girl on that show. Once this show made this shift from focusing less on the family and work life and more just on the AA group, her character wasn't really needed. So, around the third, fourth season, they slowly decided to push her out. And we see her going through a lot of things. And she can be someone who comes off, I think, and this is what a lot of audiences don't like, is that she can come off bratty and nasty and ungrateful. But you really have to kind of take this, look at it in the context of so many things. One is that she's very young. And at such a young age, she's been through so much. Having just years of her childhood where she was totally neglected by Christy. I had to basically just take care of herself and take care of Christy. And that must have been so hard for her to go through. And I think she handles it well. And we see on the show where she starts to break the cycle. And, when she gets pregnant, she's like, I'm going to give the baby away to someone who can take care of it more than me. And this is another thing that becomes really hard for her and gives her what seems like just a bad attitude. But it's really just going through a lot of trauma and just difficult things. She does like a lot of this before she's even 20 years old. Her brain's not fully developed. I think it would give anybody a bad attitude. It would make anybody very emotional. If they had to be in these kind of situations, she would come off as not nice. But I do think she's a good person. And we do see more of this when she comes back for her episode in season 6. And here she's successful. She's independent. She's not relying on Luke anymore. She's no longer using him for money or a place to live or anything. She has her successful podcast, and she's able to make a living based off of that. And she's gone at this point, no contact with Christy. And regardless of whether or not you think she should have been doing this whole podcast at all, it is, like Christy said, something that's helped her process her trauma and the difficult things she's gone through. And it's also important to realize that she's totally entitled to feel this way that she wants to feel about Christy. And this is an example of the way that the show does a really good job at holding the characters accountable for their bad actions. And it says that, yes, it is a great thing that these characters like Christy and Bonnie and all them do get better and do become better people, and that's hugely important. But it doesn't erase the damage that they've done to other people in the past. So it's totally understandable that she doesn't want to have a relationship with Christy right now. And I do think it very well is possible that some point down the road they could reconcile. We see the way they are when they are in each other's lives. And I think there is a love and a care between them. I definitely think there's a decent possibility they could reconcile and could have a relationship in the future. But it wasn't what Violet needed at that point in her life.